Hello and welcome to this very special bonus episode of the Call to Courage podcast. Today I'm going to be sharing a conversation that I had with a dear friend of mine, Gareth Martin. We were recording this conversation probably around 5 months ago, and it came out on his podcast called the Ridiculously Human Podcast. And the conversation you're going to hear today is a wild ride into a wide range of topics. And Gareth and I have shared a friendship for many years. We went to high school together. Gareth shares some interesting stories about how he remembers me in high school, as well as some of the sort of anecdotes that him and I shared on a sailing trip that we had in Croatia when I first started my personal development journey, probably around 10 years ago. Gareth and I also share a deep love for alternative news, and we love looking at how mainstream media and potential I would say institutions are capturing our global narrative and using news stories and political agendas to shape the way that human beings are potentially being led and the stories that we're being fed. We speak about some interesting topics around circumcision, and we cover some stuff that you may or may not know around circumcision. Gareth shared some stuff that I've looked at a little bit, but not too deeply, around the effect of the trauma that all of us potentially go through during our birth and how that can lie dormant in ourselves and affect us and keep us trapped almost inside a trauma cycle if we're not aware of exactly the trauma that we've come into this matrix with as a function of our birth. Something else that we speak about in this podcast is our relationships with addiction. And you're going to hear me talk in this podcast about how I had put down my engagement and my relationship with cannabis, which is a relationship that has been part of my experience for most of my adult life. I've been a cannabis user. The plant has been hugely powerful and a massive blessing for me that has really guided me and supported me in so many areas of my life. And there's also been times in my life when I haven't found it easy to be able to put it down. Like I felt like I was powerless to the control of how much cannabis I was using. And you'll hear me talk about that inside this podcast. And I want to share that when I was recording this podcast with Gareth 5 months ago, I was about 3 or 4 weeks into a sobriety journey with cannabis, which ended up lasting for 40 days. I then went traveling and I started to engage with cannabis again. And I fell back into my pattern of pretty much engaging with cannabis, if not every day, at least 5 times a week. And I felt a little disappointed, and I felt I couldn't share this podcast episode with at least coming clean about exactly where I have been in my engagement with cannabis and where I find myself at the moment. And so, yeah, having been through 40 days of sobriety and some of the magic that I share inside this podcast around the clarity of my thinking and my memory starting to improve and my ability to be able to show up more fully in my creative process, I went traveling and I fell back into my dance with her, and I've been in a place where I've been engaging with cannabis, or as I said, almost every single day, up until about a month ago. At the end of my travels, before I came back to Guatemala, I wanted to come clean and really have another conscious break from my engagements with cannabis. And at the moment, I'm 3 weeks into another stint of sobriety with cannabis, and I'm feeling really good about it. I haven't been shaming myself about the fact that I went back to engaging with cannabis. I did notice that I tend to have this pattern of it's all or nothing for me. I'm either not engaging with cannabis at all, or I tend to be engaging with it all the time. But when I'm engaging with it all the time, some of the benefits of feeling in my body and being really present and the inflow of ideas and my ability to be able to create and creativity coming through as sort of sparks of inspiration, those are all true. But there does seem to be a continual energy leak for me where there's 2 parts of myself that are continually negotiating with one another. One of them is you've done really well today. It's 12 o'clock. You've done all the important tasks you said you wanted to do today. You deserve a break. Have some cannabis and relax. And another part of me is saying wow, how much cannabis should you be having? Isn't every single day too much? Yesterday you said you were going to be sober today. And there's this continual internal dialogue that I've been with that I don't think is that healthy. One of the things that I think these power plants have, these these master teachers, cannabis is considered a master teacher plant, is that they have the ability to be able to connect us to altered states of consciousness that are deeply healing and have got so much magic for us that when used properly have got a huge amount of power and ability to be able to support and be able to heal us. But I think they need to be used and treated with respect. And the way that I think they should be used is by being very conscious about how we decide to engage with this particular plant, like cannabis, to set some intentions. I'm going to engage with cannabis this afternoon. I want to tackle these questions. I want to be creative around this particular project. Be with it, completely surrender to the process. Be with whatever it is that you want to be with in that moment of engaging with this plant. When you start to come down, do a post game, integrate it. What magic came through for me from this? What are some of the things that I learned? What was good about this experience? And then leave it for a while. Where I find myself is like, because I'm engaging with cannabis via a vape, I tend to hit it in the morning, feel amazing. A couple of hours later, I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling stoned anymore. I take it again. There's no intention really. It's just this continual, it feels like a hungry ghost that just wants to be more and more stoned. I go to sleep tonight. I wake up tomorrow, and at some point tomorrow, the negotiation starts again. Oh, you're going for a run. Why don't you have some cannabis? Or, whatever the story is. But I found myself in this continual loop. And so being another 3 weeks into this, I'm feeling really strong. I'm feeling in my power about this. I have engaged an accountability partner, Matt Dazi, who is the co-host of this show, the Call to Courage podcast. I'm accountable to him. And I've said to him that I'm going to be doing this for at least 30 days. And then I'm going to reassess and I'm going to decide what's coming next. But I feel like I'm definitely done for a while with cannabis because I don't have that internal dialogue anymore. The fact that it's not part of my life for now just feels like I've managed to reclaim all of that power. And I'm no longer negotiating and trying to bargain with myself about whether I can engage with cannabis or not. And I'm able to use that power to other things. I've been creating podcasts. I have been building my team. I have been engaging and creating a men's relationship program and enrolling people for the course. And I feel like I'm fucking firing in a way that I don't always get to do when I'm on cannabis. If you listen to the episode before this, the Call to Courage podcast that I did with Brian Jenkins, there was something that I shared at the intro of that, which was a huge realization for me in my relationship with my partner. It was like this massive crack that, listen to the podcast, but basically me waking up in the middle of the night and bursting into tears and crying for 20 minutes about something that I realized that I was holding. I don't think I would have had that breakthrough had I been continually engaging with cannabis. And the reason I think that is because I believe that sometimes these plants have a way of suppressing certain things. And I think that's why I become addicted to it. Because when things feel uncomfortable or life's not going the way it's supposed to, I engage with cannabis and suddenly the world feels better. But that does two things. One of them for me is I think it disconnects me with the uncomfortable feelings that I'm sometimes feeling, which in this case, I spoke about in the last episode, is my needing to hold space for my partner who's been sick. And how do I continually show up fully for her if I don't allow myself to feel those feelings of anger, frustration, rage, resentment, powerlessness, all of those things, and I'm just continually getting stoned? I suppress those emotions and I never feel them. And emotions that get suppressed eventually manifest as dis-ease in the body. And I think the fact that I had 3 months, or rather 3 weeks of being sober from cannabis allowed me to really bring those feelings up, as uncomfortable as they felt, and had this major breakthrough that I don't think I would have had I been engaging with cannabis. The second part about my cannabis journey, which I think I speak about in this podcast with Gareth, is there's a part of me when I'm engaging with cannabis where life feels so fucking fantastic and amazing, and I'm doing this and I'm the best I've ever been, and I work out really well and I'm super present and I'm amazing in bed and I'm doing all the things. And there's a part of me that's living a little bit in fantasy where some of that is not actually really reflective of what's true in my reality, specifically around my business. Like for the last few years, I've had amazing ideas. I come up with these great strategies. I share it with the team. When it doesn't quite go exactly the way they want, I tend to be stoned again. And then I come up with another idea. And I continually loop in this realm of like, I'm doing it, but my physical reality is not actually reflecting back what it is that I'm genuinely calling in. And so I'm really excited about these last 3 weeks of sobriety. I'm excited about the clarity that I'm creating with. I actually have some cannabis here, but I'm not being called to it. I feel like I really have a solid relationship with it now, and I'm going to keep this going for the next, as long as I feel like I want to keep it going. And I'm going to stay accountable to Matt, and I'm going to stay accountable to you, a listener of this podcast, as to how that's going with my journey in staying in a better, more healthy relationship with cannabis. If you are in a place where you are battling addiction, whether it's with cannabis or any substances, I want you to know that the accountability of being accountable to somebody else is a huge, huge, huge piece of your ability to be able to come into greater alignment with the relationship that you're in addiction with. And if you're holding something in your world at the moment, whether you feel addicted to social media, alcohol, cannabis, cigarettes, whatever your thing is, I want to make you an offer that I want to be your accountability partner. And in the show notes of every single one of these podcasts is links to my Instagram. Send me a DM on Instagram and say, Gareth, I'm in this place. I want to be held accountable to have a break from whatever it is that you're dancing with at the moment, whatever feels like it has a hold on you. And I want you to know that I'm going to be there for you and support you in the same way that I'm being supported by my brother, Matt. And so if that feels like something that you need support with, check the links in the show notes, reach out to me, and I'd be happy to support you in coming into greater alignment with whatever it is that feels like it's got power over you at the moment. Before we get into this episode with Gareth Martin, I also want to share something that I'm super stoked that I've recently created called the Soulmate Safari. From when I was a young kid, I wanted to be a game ranger. I love animals. I love the wild nature. I'm from South Africa, as you know, and we always went to national parks, and the idea of being in and close to wild nature is fucking exhilarating and fills me with, just a sense of connectedness to the divine. And in many ways, I feel like my church, my higher power, my connection to something greater than me is really found in nature. And so the Soulmate Safari is really me using some of the relationship tools that I've learned and been using in my own relationship over the last 5 years, and sharing them with men that are looking to attract their ideal partner, or men that are already in a partnership but feel that they don't have the tools to be able to navigate some of the challenges that come up in a partnership. A relationship is one of the most powerful vehicles for personal growth. And there are elements of your personal growth that you will never be able to access until you can safely navigate a solid relationship. And the reason is that as soon as you start to go deep with somebody and the new relationship energy starts to wear off and you both start to become familiar with one another and the intimacy starts to fade and you start to have money stuff come up and you start to have health stuff come up and the fucking human experience starts to just shape you, you need to be really solid, not only to be able to hold yourself, but also to be able to hold your partner. And if you find yourself in this continual loop of running the sort of 3 month to 1 year, this is too difficult, she or he is too crazy for me, I'm out of here, somebody else will be better, and be in that particular loop, the Soulmate Safari is going to give you the 3 keys that you need to escape the dating jungle and to attract and maintain an ideal transformational partnership without getting eaten by a crocodile. I'm really excited about the Soulmate Safari. You're going to meet an amazing ranger whose name is Ranger G, and he has the goods that you need to safely escape the dating jungle. The links to the Soulmate Safari are in the show notes of this episode. And now, my conversation being interviewed on the Ridiculously Human podcast with Gareth Martin.
Sweet. All right. Let's start. Gareth Pickering, my boy. Welcome back to the Ridiculously Human podcast. But it's been 6 years. Can you believe it? October 2017, China was when you came on last. And yeah, man, a lot has happened since then. And it's just great to have you on again, bud.
Thanks, man. It feels good to be here. And yeah, I'm really glad that you've taken the opportunity to do this again and reactivate the podcast. I know, yeah, you guys put a lot of effort into the first one and then you needed to take a break and life got in the way, but I'm stoked that the Ridiculously Human podcast is coming back around.
Yeah, but well, you've been an inspiration quietly in the background for me with your podcast, The Call to Courage. Just seeing you doing what you're doing and having me on like a few weeks ago was was like, okay, Gareth, you got to pull your finger out because you do enjoy doing this, like I flipping love doing it. And just having kind of a guy like you who's always been an inspiration to me, kind of doing things and always taking action. You kind of lead through action and motivate that way. So I appreciate that. But it's got me to get this going again after almost 3 years. It's been such a long time, but
Thanks. It feels good to be here. And the first time we did that conversation was actually the first time I was in Guatemala, and my status in Guatemala then was pretty temporary. And I've subsequently made it home, and it feels good to be doing this now in my own studio and be having this chat again with you. So thanks for having me, bro.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Well, your studio is looking beautiful. I just want to ask you something. You have a lot of like cool descriptions for things, and one of the things you talk about is pre-game, which is effectively like your intent in terms of how you show up for things. So like, what is your kind of pre-game for a podcast like this?
So pre-game for me is really the setup that we do before anything. And the pre-game is something that I do before I start my day. That's before I do a podcast. It could be the pre-game for the turning 40, like I take a half day and then, pre-game a whole decade of my life. But it really just comes from the frame of recognizing that if you take time to set something up and set your intentions and at least have a plan of how you want things to go, you at least have a direction that you're about to head in. So a pre-game for me for this podcast would be, it always starts with gratitude, find something to be grateful for, the opportunity to be able to speak to friends that I met in primary school, the technology that connects us despite being on opposite sides of the world. And that's how it started every single pre-game. And then a sense of how I want it to go. So I would use adjectives to describe how I want to feel inside the podcast. So for this, it would have been something like, feel in my ease, feel comfortable, be in service, those types of things. They could have some practical things like, I want to speak specifically about something like, I don't know, a specific topic. When I do a pre-game for my day, it'll include like my pre-game for this morning was like, I had a meeting before this, spoke about I wanted this podcast to, as I described it now, be clear, be in service, feel connected to you, make us both feel relaxed in the podcast. And then I have the rest of the afternoon open, and that's just spaciousness. And so, that's what a pregame looks like for me. But it's really just recognizing that when we take the time to set up, it determines how we show up. And for a lot of my life, I was just flowing from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and life was sort of happening to me. But consciously taking a moment to breathe and decide how we want the next meeting, moment, conversation, podcast, or decade of your life to go. The intention that you bring to those moments brings presence in a way that really supports what it is you do next. And so, that's sort of how I would have prepared for this and how I prepared my day using that pre-game format.
Yeah, I think that's so cool, man. I think it's such a lekker thing to actually like think about, what you want to sort of like show up as, or how you want to show up, and what you kind of want to offer or get out of a conversation or whatever it is that you have coming up. And I think, it kind of puts you kind of one step forward, of everything. And it's, if we all kind of did that and we were more thoughtful, it would, it would make all of our lives a hell of a lot easier, I reckon.
It's like, I think most of the wisdom traditions that you look at recognize that when you're in the present moment, you're not worrying about what happened yesterday or concerned about what I said or should have said, and you're not concerned about tomorrow and what's going to happen then. The idea of being in the present moment is just being here right now and accepting everything that's happening in our experience right now. And I think a pregame is really that opportunity to bring you into this moment now. And the more often you do a pregame, it can be a formal thing that you write in your journal every morning, but it could also be, okay, I'm about to go and sit down and have lunch with my partner. Just take a breath and be like, okay, I'm grateful that I've got lunch and a partner, and I'd love it to be flowing in conversation. Just decide there, like for me, it brings you into that present moment in a continual way. That's, it's not even that fluffy. It's like some of that stuff people have been talking about for years. So it's bringing awareness to that present moment as often as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And I was wondering, like, do you feel like your pre-game is different for a podcast like this, which is effectively like with a buddy, right? That we've known for each other for a long time. Is it different to say if you're speaking to more of a stranger? And And off the back of that, do you feel less nervous or more nervous when it's with somebody you know or don't know?
I think if it's somebody that I don't know, I would spend some time doing some research. Like there's a sense of wanting to make sure that I at least have some entry points so that I don't run out of things to say, specifically if I'm interviewing. You and I specifically have got a deep connection that expands, many years, and we've traveled together and had lots of deep conversations in a way that I feel super comfortable that we could easily flow for 3 or 4 hours without running out of things to say. So I actually wasn't so anxious about this. If I was going on to Rogan, I might have maybe meditated a little bit longer. I don't know, but maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. I think, I think I am feeling a little bit of anxiousness. Like I notice my heart's racing, being a guest on a show and knowing that it's recorded. Like I still have that sense of like a little bit of anxiety. And I feel it all the time, actually. Like we've been doing these men's circles and I actually feel a lot of resistance going into them, like I'm like, from 1 week to the next, even though I've been doing them now for a couple of months and we're on like circle number 15, I feel resistance of like, oh, fuck, I don't want to do it. Maybe I do something else, or what if no one shows up? And then I get in and I get butterflies and I get nervous, and then just resting into that place is getting easier. And then afterwards, I always feel good. But like, I don't know if that anxiety ever goes away. And I've been talking about this to Araminta, my partner. She does these sort of week-long transformation retreats, and she's done them for the last 10 years. She says the same thing, like going into them, there's always that sense of like, oh, like maybe even a bit of dread and resistance. But yeah, I think it's probably natural. And what I put it down to is I think there's a part of me specifically in holding space where I go into a circle that it's like a growth edge. There's a part of us that actually doesn't want to grow. It wants to just stay the same and be comfortable. And knowing that I've got to go in there and hold the space and sit with that anxiety and just be okay and breathe into it is a growth edge every time. And I think I know in me, there's a part of me that just would rather be lazy and fucking not do it, so I think that comes up for me every time. And I feel it even now on this podcast.
Yeah, no, definitely. And me as well, but I feel kind of nervous as well because like you're my buddy. I hold you in high regard. So I want to like bring my best self, I don't want to fuck up the podcast. I want to be well prepared. And it does, I feel like a little bit like, like my heart is beating a little bit faster maybe than normal, just because I respect you so much as a person. Even though, like you said, like, I mean, we could speak for flipping 20 hours, and have nothing to kind of like, no gaps in between, and have great conversation. But I think for me, that's what it is. Like, I don't want to let you down as a mate, so that's where the kind of the heart beating sort of comes in for me. And but I also think what you were saying about the resistance, but for me, I always think resistance is a good thing, because the resistance is telling you that you're actually doing something right and you're doing something that you should be doing. So I think that's actually a good feeling to feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's good that you feel like that. You're doing good things. Things that kind of make you feel a little bit nervous, because you are doing something that's right. You're putting yourself kind of out there, and it's always difficult to kind of put yourself out there, because I guess you're always like putting yourself like on this sort of pedestal to kind of be judged a little bit, on what you're actually offering and doing. So that resistance and anxiousness is actually a good thing to feel, I reckon.
Yeah, I think it's, have you seen that little circle that says where growth happens? And it's like the circle is your comfort zone and the growth happens outside of that. I think that resistance and the anxiety is stepping into a place where you don't feel comfortable. It's the same reason you go and exercise or get into the ice bath or sit down and meditate. Like, no one wants to do that stuff, but that's the frame of what it is that we do, so that we can continually expand and make space for personal growth. And I think that's what it is. And I think that's where it comes from for me.
Yeah, definitely. But that's a great segue. So talking about growth, right? You and I, like, we went to primary school together, then we went to high school. We then had like a long break. You were a couple of years ahead of me. And the first time we caught up again, well, one of the first times I can at least remember, like the deep times we caught up, was when we went to Croatia together. And I've got the story for you that that was an awesome time. But I've got a story for you that I don't know if you remember saying it to me. But this is, I mean, like for me, in terms of how you've grown as a person since then, is just like you're a different bloke, completely. So I don't know if you remember, but I think it was like one of our first stops, or maybe we hadn't even taken off yet. I can't remember, on the boat. But we were walking down like these stairs, either from the restaurant or on our way to a restaurant. And you said to me, like, yeah, you're like, you know what, I'll know that I've made it when I've got a Porsche. And I think you had kind of just left South Africa, like maybe been a few months out of sort of Joburg and stuff. And I was like, interesting. Gareth is still kind of in that mindset. I don't know if you even recall saying that, but like, what does it sort of sound like to you when I say that back to you?
I mean, I'm not denying that I would have said that. There's a very strong part of me that recognizes, rather seeks validation through external pieces. Like I think my journey over the most of my life, and probably for the rest of my life, is going to be accepting myself for exactly how I am. And I think there's a part of me that's grew up in a world where I thought I would be validated or accepted among my peers, or be attractive to women if I had a bank balance or a Porsche or whatever it is. So yeah, I probably did say that. And that's not something that lights me up at the moment, but I'm sure it did at the time. I do have other things at the moment that drive me and make me get out of bed in the morning. Drive me wasn't supposed to be a pun, but but I still do enjoy having nice things in my life. I'm not so attached so much to brands anymore. In fact, in some ways, I've actually gone like quite far away from recognizing that I think brands in some ways are actually a trap. And I think, anyway, that's a different rabbit hole, but I think in some ways that probably was me. And I've grown a little bit from that, but I still find myself, like longing and desiring and having a need for things for perhaps different reasons. Like I feel now a lot of my desire is to be in service, but I'm still spending a lot of time looking at my money story. Like, what is the thing that's driving that? Underneath that is also a desire to be received and have value come back to me in the form of money. What does that mean? I think I've been looking at my relationship with money and how I've seen money modeled in my family and in society and stuff like that. So it's not completely gone, to be honest. Like I still have that desire. I still have some anxiety of running out of money, and those things are still alive for me, for sure.
What's so interesting?
I don't have a Porsche, but I do think I've made it.
No, exactly. No, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. Like I see you as a completely different guy, like from who that guy was, and I think all the traveling you did and stuff like just changed you hugely as a person. But you speak about the relationship with money, and I think that's such an important topic. Hey, I find like through my own coaching that I do, like that, and just through being kind of like aware now of like people and how they are and how they react, that so much of how we are as a person is related to our relationship with money, and that is impacted by like how we were brought up. What are our parents' relationships to money like? And I think it's like a really important thing for people to consider, like to, when they're doing some of their own growth work, to just go back and to go, okay, cool. What is my relationship to things, to money, to status? And how is that kind of like impacting me in life, and like how I am, how I react to people, how I react to situations? Do I get jealous? All these sort of things. So I think it's something that we maybe sometimes neglect, but it's an important thing to sort of look into, is our relationship with money.
Yeah, what you finished with there is our relationship to money. And I think I've been cultivating this practice in my own life of recognizing how I am in relation to things in my life. So how am I in relationship to my body? How am I in relationship to money? And if I was to give money a persona, like it was a person, like a partner or a girlfriend or something, there have been parts of my life where I would probably look like a psycho or a stalker. There's almost like a greed and like there must be more and more and more of it, and it doesn't look like a healthy relationship. Yet I see many people in that same relationship with money. Like, it's not enough of this, I've got to have more and more and more. If you looked at that and evaluated it as a healthy relationship, the same as you would with your partner, people would think you're pretty weird. you'd be like, wow, bro, you're pretty obsessed with that person. Like, maybe you should take a breath, like,
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
recognize there's a part of me that's been like that, almost possessive. Like, I don't want to lose this person. And I think one of the things I've been able to do well is my relationship with my partner. I'm that part of my life, I feel like I've got dialed in. I recognize that, yeah, I want her to live and be free and let her go and trust that she's going to be there for me and show up for it. But I'm not there every single day with my claws in and making sure that she doesn't go anywhere. But I noticed that I still sometimes have that relationship with money. So yeah, trying to cultivate that trust and that lightness that comes from being in a relationship with my partner, that I can also have with my relationship with money and my relationship with cannabis and my relationship with my body and my relationship to the world. And just, yeah, see how healthy those relationships are by looking at them as relationships. And yeah, the money one is deep and gnarly, because yeah, I think we receive the imprints of what we see being modeled with money from our families. And we also see what happens in our collective society around money. And the reality is it's something that we created, human beings created, as a way to be in service for us. And I think it's basically got us all by the nose and it's pulling us all around collectively in a way that most of us are in service to money. Most of us make most of our decisions based on money. Like, I'll do this job because of money. I can spend this because it costs this much. I'll live here because it's this budget. And it's like, in some ways, our whole perception of how we choose to live our reality is in many ways shaped by money. And yeah, I want money to have less of a hold on me than that. I want to be able to choose my life, my choices, where I live, what I eat, etc., based on what I want. And yeah, money facilitates that for sure. But I don't want to be in the place where I've been before, which was, yeah, I built an entire advertising agency and business because it made money. Like, I saw an opportunity to make money. But when I really tuned in, I loved the experience. I loved what I did. I loved learning about business. I wasn't deeply passionate about building an advertising agency. That's kind of a big thing for me to reflect on and be like, fuck, dude, that's 10 years of your life. You did something just for money. And we do need money. But the time you and I have had this conversation, time is much more precious and important than money, because time's the one thing we can't get back. We can always make more money. And so, yeah, I'm very careful now in cultivating this awareness of wanting to be very aware of where it is that I spend my time, and yeah, make sure that I don't make too many decisions only for the sake of, is this going to make money or not?
Yeah, it's really interesting how controlling money actually is. Yeah,
I think it's, we've allowed it to be. It's not actually controlling. We allow ourselves to be controlled because of it. It's not, money is just money. It's just numbers and paper.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, money is like, it's anything it's almost what we give value to, like in the past, there was like rice was money, so it's like, it literally is this kind of just made up construct that we allow to govern us. And it's, yeah, we need to kind of break those shackles somehow, almost as a society, because it does hold us back, I feel, a hell of a lot. And yeah, anyway, but you talk a lot about kind of relationships and stuff too. One of the relationships that you mentioned now was cannabis. That you, I think that for a lot of your life you've actually smoked, and I guess in a way, it's a little bit of an addiction. Not like you were like crazy with it, but just like, say, maybe a joint here and there. But recently, it sounds like you've kind of departed with smoking, and I don't know what's if you've replaced with anything, or just what the story is there. But maybe you can just talk a little bit about that kind of journey and breaking away from it.
Thank you. Cannabis has been such a beautiful plant for me. I think it's represented so many different things for me at different times in my life. And I started engaging with cannabis when I was in high school. And at that stage of my life, I recognized that it was my opportunity to stand up and do something against the frame of what I was allowed to do. Like, it was illegal. My parents didn't want me to do it. Like, all of those things. When I smoked my first joint, it represented a part of me being able to be me. And I've since recognized that I've got quite a strong rebel inside me that doesn't want to be told what to do. And there's a part of that rebel that really felt amazing when I smoked cannabis, even as a youngster at 13 or 14, whenever I first started engaging with it. And it represented something to me then, you know. So I was a rebel. I was an outsider. I was cool in some ways. And at different times in my life, cannabis has represented different things to me. And so, you know, when we grew up and suddenly I was like, you know, mid-20s and my friends had started to get married, and I would go to a dinner party and I would like, you know, or a weekend away with some friends, and I would have a joint. I would be the guy who had the joint, and everybody would like, you know, maybe skinner a little bit about it, or, you know, gossip a bit about it, but then most people would still have some anyway. And so it represented that to me then. And then I didn't engage with it so much in my sort of late 20s, early 30s. I had other substances that were part of my experience then: cocaine, a lot of alcohol, those types of things, specifically in the restaurant world in London, lots of ecstasy and MDMA in the rave scene and all of that. Again, my rebel. But I think what happened then is I then went and built my advertising agency, which took 10 years in South Africa. And then when you and I started the Croatia trip, that was early on in my travels, cannabis represented everything that wasn't my life in Johannesburg. You know, I could smoke a joint at 10 o'clock in the morning on the beach, and suddenly I was like, I wasn't working in an office and I was stoned on the beach in the day. And there was something about that stage of my life where cannabis, you know, she was so gentle and so beautiful in those times, you know, and it was a way to be able to have connection with people in hostels and on the road, and, you know, sharing a joint and talking about life with people on the beach or wherever I happen to be. Like, she's been a really, really strong ally and represented different things for me at different times. Over the last few years, I've recognized a part of me, yeah, when I look at it as a relationship, perhaps a little bit codependent, you know, like I would be with her the whole time, you know, smoking almost every single day. I had a vape, and so it was easy to access. And yeah, I just noticed that I was thinking about it a lot. And there was a part of me thinking about whether I should stop and whether I shouldn't. So there was this internal dialogue between two parts of myself, one that says, we're going to keep smoking, and one that's like, fuck, dude, how long are you going to keep smoking for? Do you still need it? Are you doing long-term damage? Why are you having this conversation? Like, this is a narrative that's been stuck on repeat for a while. And so, yeah, I've just been looking at my relationship with it, and it has been, codependence is probably a good word. You know, there's a part of me when I look at it again, like relationship, there'll be a part of me that says, okay, we're going to have a break for a week. And if it was a partner that I was connecting with, it's like, okay, we're not going to see each other for a week because we're going to take a little break. But the next morning after my first meeting, I'm like, oh, now I can rest and relax, and I want to engage with cannabis again. It's synonymous of me like going around to the girl's house the next day and being like, I know we said we'd have a break for a week, but ding dong, I'm here again. You know, it's like, fuck, dude. You know, so there's like a little bit of a hook that she had on me for a while. And yeah, about almost 3 weeks ago now, I decided to put it down, and I've done what I've called the conscious uncoupling. And yeah, I'm feeling really good about my choice. I don't know if I'm never going to engage with it again, but the fact that I've had a clean break from it for now feels really supportive of me. And what I'm noticing is, probably for the last 6 years, I haven't been more than, I've had a break for a month a couple of times, but cannabis stays in your system for up to 80 days. So I don't think I've had a completely clear mind for the last 6 years or 7 or 8 years, as long as I've been traveling. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what that's like. I'm also excited not to have this internal dialogue about whether I should or I shouldn't, because that headspace is now just not even there anymore. I've closed that window and I'm clear about that. So yeah, it's been a beautiful and deep love affair. And yeah, it feels like it's time for us to see other people for a while.
So do you feel any like difference physically yet? I mean, I know it hasn't been 80 days and stuff, but are you feeling any difference?
Yeah, so I'm feeling a lot clearer. I'm feeling like I've got more energy to allocate, or more headspace to allocate to other things, because I'm not falling into this hole of having these negotiations with myself. What I am noticing, though, is some anxiety was coming up for me the last couple of weeks around certain things, which I think I haven't had to be with before, because where I felt that anxiety before, I would then engage with cannabis and then just not worry about it. I'd just be like, oh, there we go, everything's fucking perfect again. But it's really me in some avoidant pattern of not being with what genuinely is. And so, yeah, having to sit with that anxiety and just work through it, I think is part of the process of letting go of any addiction. Part of this journey has me been sort of deep diving into understanding what drives addiction and what it really sits, what's at the basis of it. And as you let go of anything, whether it's a sex addiction, a coffee addiction, a cannabis addiction, whatever it is, there's going to be a time when you start to feel uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable feelings that are present that you've been masking with whatever it is that you're using for your addiction, you need to be with those. But they do get softer and softer and softer and more gentle as you start to accept them and sit with them and realize what's at the base of those. So I think that's been true for me. So I have felt some anxiety, but I'm feeling more spacious around it. I'm feeling more in my ease around it. There's a part of me that also just feels like, yeah, I've fucking done it. You know, there's something about having like conquered it somehow, that it doesn't have a hold on me in a way that it did. And yeah, that feels good. And I think there has been clarity. There's a short-term memory loss thing that happens specifically when you've been engaging with cannabis, where you can forget what you're talking about. Like your brain brings focus in certain areas and unlocks certain neurological pathways that allow you access to linking things and creativity that you don't often have without it. But I think there is a cost in terms of the short-term memory effects. So like I would come downstairs to get something, grab something else, normally food, and then go upstairs and be like, oh shit, I forgot to get the thing I went downstairs for, you know. So there's a part of that that's come back, which feels good. And yeah, I think those are some of the things that I'm feeling in terms of having let go of that. But I think the biggest for me is not having the argument with myself about should I or shouldn't I. That mental space is now free for me to allocate to other things, and that feels like a big one.
Definitely. And even like, you talk about anxiety. I think sometimes it's those little things which actually also cause anxiety. So that little discussion, like, should I, shouldn't I, it's actually causing you a bit of anxiety, like it's also like, just kind of semi-related, but like, often people find themselves quite anxious, and it's because they've got like so many things like on their to-do list that are just kind of little things that kind of just keep on going to them, one day to the next day to the next day to the next day, and you're like, and you never fucking do them. And then you kind of wonder why you're anxious. And it's like, yeah, well, you've had this thing on your to-do list for 20 days, and all it is you need to, I don't know, you need to scrape some paint off the flipping wall, but you haven't done it. You know what I mean? But you've got 20 of these things. And I think a lot of people actually live like in a kind of anxious state because they do have all these things to do, it's it's kind of really interesting. Yeah. But anxiety is not a nice thing to live with, is it?
I've never actually really felt it, to be honest, but I think it's probably been masked by the fact that I've been using substances at various times. Alcohol is also one for me. Like my relationship with alcohol is much, much, much more healthy than it used to be. Like I'll have a glass of wine. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I had a glass of wine, but like maybe once a week. Sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 times a week, but then I'll go a couple of weeks without it, compared to having alcohol at every single potential engagement, which is anchored in anxiety. Like if I go, the idea of doing family events or social events without alcohol in the past just filled me with fear, because the alcohol was like a coping mechanism so that I didn't have to feel the anxiousness. And for me, that anxiousness was actually grounded in not being okay with being me, like it's so weird. Like some part of me is not okay to just be me. I need to, get a bit loose, because then I can hopefully have conversations with people, or, the energy will flow differently, or I feel more confident or something like that. But yeah, the basis of it is really just this self-acceptance that, yeah, the anxiety is only coming from not feeling like I'm okay here.
Definitely.
And then I fill it with alcohol or smoking a joint or something.
Yeah. I just talking about that, like not feeling you. One topic that I want to kind of like talk about was actually 2 topics, but the one will lead into the other. So honesty, right? I think honesty is like such a powerful trait, and I find that you are a very honest guy with like the information that you share online. And I was wondering, like, were you always like that? Were you always very honest? And if not, like, when did it change, and like, why did it change?
Great question. And yeah, it's become a pillar in my life now. The idea of being radically honest, completely honest about everything. I believe that everything that we do, the behaviors that we sort of embody in our outer world, are really just a reflection of our inner world. So like, if you're not honest with yourself, you tend not to be honest with the outside world. And so the practice is really the cultivation of inner confidence, inner acceptance, inner self-love, inner honesty, being completely honest with ourselves. And I don't think I've always been completely honest with myself in some way. So one of those is an example I already spoke about, was like, you build a business for 10 years and you're doing the things, and you, at a surface level, everything looks like it's good. But when you genuinely be honest with yourself, it's like, am I loving this? It's like, fuck no, I would rather be somewhere else. Like, I don't want to wake up at 8 o'clock and have all these meetings and have a team and do this stuff. So a part of me wasn't really honest with myself, but I kept on going anyway because of whatever my story was. Have to make money, have to be this guy, have to be whatever. And so that time in my life, I wasn't 100% honest with myself, and it was reflected in my outer relationships. I wasn't always 100% honest in how I moved in my business dealings. I wasn't always 100% honest in terms of how I moved intimately with my partners. Some of that was more blatant than others. There's like this little gray area, which I've spent a lot of time looking at. This is also sometimes wrapped up in a story. I'll give you an example. Perhaps in my intimate connections, if I was connecting with somebody like a woman, I would want to perhaps get my needs met, but my real honest truth underneath that was like, I wanted to be lovers with her, but I didn't want to have a long-term relationship. And if I got a sense that she wanted something more than just intimacy, I would be like maybe a little bit economical with the truth, for want of a better word, of like, I would say something like, I'm not so sure if this is what I want, but let's see where it goes. Where my truth, when I tune into my genuine truth and I have the courage to say it, it's like, hey, I don't see us being anything else except lovers for the next however long it feels good for us, but I don't see us being boyfriend and girlfriend, and I definitely want to see other people. I never really had the honesty to be able to navigate it that clearly and that openly. So wrapped up in a story that I maybe didn't want to hurt her feelings, and I also wanted to get my own needs met, I would probably not necessarily be as completely honest and forthright as I should be. And yeah, that came back to me at some point a couple of years later when I connected with somebody who I felt deeply in love with, and I was head over heels. I thought, this is the one, we're going to spend our lives together. And during our connection, she would share that, yeah, we were together for 3 months, and then we were going to go our separate ways and come back together afterwards. And every time we spoke about meeting in South Africa, which was going to be our plan, we'd spend time, the 3 months we spent together was in Thailand. She said, okay, well, we'll see each other in South Africa. Some part of me was like, didn't feel 100% right. Like I couldn't quite, she was saying all the right things, but some part of me was like, I don't feel, but I didn't listen to myself. I was just like, well, this is the woman of my dreams. I'm going to do this. Anyway, we went our separate ways in Bangkok after 3 months together, and we never saw each other again. And she pretty much ghosted me after that, as she carried on with her life, and she ended it there. But that was such a strong reference point for me to realize that she had done to me what I had been doing to other people, women in my life, for so many years. And it was like, she didn't have the courage to say, listen, bro, amazing, loving this, and it's only for the next 3 months, because after that, I'm going somewhere else. I don't want to have anything else to do with this or you, or I've got somebody else, or whatever her truth was. She didn't share her truth. So I'm left now holding all of this mess, which I realize is what I had done in my relationships for a lot of my life. And so that was an important turning point, seeing and feeling that. And Sam Harris has a book called Lying, which is really like a long essay. It's probably like 60 or 70 pages, which talks about honesty and radical honesty. And it talks also about how when we use, let's say, for example, we're not completely truthful with somebody as a way to protect them. So your partner who you love dearly says to you, how do I look in this dress? And you're like, but you say yes anyway. like that is actually not being completely honest with the person, and you're not doing them any favors by not being completely honest with them in that space, because they're genuinely asking you for something. And if you don't give them the honest truth, you're not actually supporting what it is that they've actually asked you for. So there's like a disconnect in terms of the energetic match of what they've asked you for and what is your truth versus what you say. And so, yeah, I've just noticed that those small little things, even when they're dressed up as, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, yeah, it just creates the way I understand it is like it creates a mismatch. So if you and I can show you another example where I wasn't completely honest in the past, where at the end of my advertising agency stint in South Africa, the business was sort of going downhill. I was feeling in a bit of a shitty place. I would meet, let's say, you for beers, and you say, hey, Gareth, how's it going with work? And I'd be like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. I want him to think things are good. So I'll be like, yeah, no, work's cool. So how are things with you? What happens in that moment is the words come out of my mouth and they hit your ears, and you're like, okay, I heard him say that. But there's more going on than just the language happening between us. Like there's a part of our energetic bodies and our animals that really can feel one another in a way that's like, when I tell you things are good and you can feel that I'm not good about the thing we just spoke about, you don't trust me, because a part of you just like, something's up with that dude. Like he said that, but I didn't feel that. And so it's almost impossible to build a relationship of trust if you're not completely honest, because something just feels fucking out, and we can't articulate it because he said everything was good, but I don't feel that everything is good. And I asked him and he said so. So there's like this backwards forwards loop that never actually gets resolved. And I think that's at the basis of what was making many of my personal connections and relationships an absolute mess, to be honest, because I'm pretending to be all these different people, telling stories about different things, whether it was around business or intimacy or whatever it was that I wasn't okay with. The people that love me the most, they don't want to hear a fucking story. They want to know what's genuinely true. And if you can't handle what's genuinely true, either don't ask or we're not supposed to be friends. But when you do ask and we say that we're best mates, to not be completely honest it's impossible to build trust. And it's kind of a hard thing to pinpoint because, as I said, I will have told you everything's good, but some part of you feels that it's not. And then there's just that disconnect so that's sort of how I understand the radical honesty piece. And it hasn't always been easy, having made the decision to be radically honest, but it has made my life so much more simple. Like it's just, people that are not vibing with me the same way either just disappear or I disappear, or, we get to get to the bottom of things really quickly, because we get to be with what's authentically alive in every single moment by sharing what's up. When I say, hey bro, how's your relationship with your wife? And you go, no, it's good. And some part of me feels that it's not good. Like it's really difficult to penetrate that again, So yeah, I think that's been such a powerful thing to live by. And yeah, I can share another quick story on where I did intimacy differently with radical honesty. When I had made this decision to be completely honest, and I was in Mexico. This is probably maybe 5-6 years ago, before I met Araminta, and I met a girl on Tinder. We went on a couple of dates and we connected and we became lovers, but I quickly got a sense that she was looking for long-term partnership. And I was clear at that stage that I was in a stage of my life where I was going to be traveling somewhere else. And my old pattern would have been like, oh, fuck, we'll just see what happens. I'm just going to maybe avoid the difficult conversation and I'll say goodbye at the airport and we'll flow our separate ways and I'll manage it later. But I chose differently this time. And we went for lunch and I said, hey, I just want to give you the sense that I'm loving what we have here. This couple of weeks we've spent together has been cool. But in 3 weeks' time, I'm getting on an airplane and I'm going, and I don't see us being forever together. Like, I'm happy to carry on this adventure here. And she's like, okay, a little bit sad. She's like, I appreciate that, but I'm looking for something more permanent. And we left lunch like having ended it. And I was like, oh, fuck, well, that's the end of that. But she actually sent another message a couple of days later and said, can we go for lunch again? So I said, yeah, cool. We went for lunch and she said, listen, I appreciate your honesty. And I really just want you to know that I love the time we spent together. And I want to keep spending time together for the next 3 weeks, knowing that you're going. And in that moment, I was like, wow, like now she's making the choice with all the information on the table. Like, I've been able to own my truth about what that is. It did suck because I thought that I wasn't going to be able to continue connecting with her, and I was having a cool time with her. But at least now she had all the information to be able to make these decisions and show up for herself. And yeah, we had lots of deep conversations about it, but we've remained friends till this day because of the choice that I made there. And had I made it differently, I may have continued to connect with her for the next couple of weeks, but she would have been like, that arsehole just left and wasn't completely honest. And yeah, that was a defining moment of being like, okay, it was hard for me to have that lunch. And, basically it felt like burning a bridge. It was like, she's going to probably tell me to, this doesn't match for what it is that she's looking for. And I'm going to stop getting late. And that's not what I want to do. And so that felt difficult to do. But the fact that it came around and the universe showed me very clearly that, well, fuck, dude, that's the right thing to do, was just a moment that made it very difficult for me to be anything else except completely honest as often as I can. And yeah, man, it's been so supportive of business connections, friendships, family stuff, my partnership with Araminta. So yeah.
But I love that. There's so much in there. I think honesty has got a lot to do with how you feel about yourself as a person. So if you are like truly comfortable with who you are and kind of what you represent, and then I think you're not too worried about what people think if you tell them the truth, and so I think it's got a lot to do with that, which is obviously kind of tied into maturity. And we all have to go through these things, make all these mistakes and grow older and experience heartache and heartbreak and whatnot. And that then, hopefully if we're conscious enough, we will learn from all those kind of things. And I think, definitely being comfortable in your own skin allows you to kind of be more honest. I've got a couple of things, actually. I once read this Irish proverb. They call it a proverb, but it's not really. It's just, and it was like, if you never tell a lie, then you never have to remember anything. So effectively, if you're always honest, you never have to remember anything. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that as like a youngster, and I was like, yeah, see, that's a cool way to live, because lots of people will go through life telling flippin' white lies, like here and there, you tell a white lie, and then see, 3 years later, you're speaking to this person and they ask you the same question. You have a completely different answer because you've forgotten the white lie you told them. And then they go, oh, that's interesting. And then you never hear from them again because you've broken that trust, because you told them a little lie because you weren't, like you said, courageous enough, or you didn't have the own self-belief to say what you really meant. So I think, honesty is such a great one. And I had a similar experience in many ways when it comes to relationships. When I first came to South America, which was like 2013, I had a sabbatical from work. And I said to myself at the start of the trip, I'm really not going to try and like be with anyone, right? Like in terms of chicks and stuff. Like I was like, I just want to take the sabbatical and I want to just travel and meet people and have deep relationships. And I flippin' did that. But like, I think for the first 6 months, at the end I met a girl, but anyway, that also fizzled out like very, very quickly. But for those 6 months, like I just formed such deep relationships with people. Like, and like you said, to this day, I'm still friends with a lot of these people, like quite a few of them girls, because there wasn't that like, oh, I'm trying to, be with you, whatever. And I think there's some cool lessons in that, like trying to not sort of get with every kind of chick you are. If you're a youngster, like try just be a little bit more mature, and you're going to have sort of deeper, longer, more meaningful relationships with people that that are probably going to end up being lifelong friends, because you have a lot of the same interests in terms of traveling and exploring and adventure and stuff. And yeah, no, it was kind of a similar experience to some of the things that you had. And yeah, it taught me a lot, but it taught me a lot to not be chasing all the time,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of wisdom in that. And I think what comes up for me is like for most of us, if we haven't taken the time to do the work and shine the light of awareness on what's driving our intimacy, which again is what you spoke to. It's like, are you completely okay with being you? It's a very different thing to be completely honest, completely open, completely clear about your desires and your boundaries and stuff, with the people that you're connecting with, intimacy can be a strong part of that. And you can still have lifelong friends with people if you move in that way. Like you can still have lovers that you meet and, they remain lifelong friends because you've been in your integrity the whole way through the engagement. That I don't think is specific to do with intimacy. It has more to do with how you showed up in that particular connection. Because, the part of me that was, perhaps connecting with women as a way to get my own needs met, only to make myself feel better, compared to the version of me that is starting to feel a bit better about myself, that says, you know what, she may say no to me, and that'll mean that I'm going to cut off this connection from an intimate perspective, is really, again, the base of what you're saying is like, are you completely okay with being you? Because the intimacy, I don't think itself is the problem. It's how you hold the intimacy and the intimate connections that can make it explode or, become messy. Assuming, of course, that the person you're connecting with has also got a level of maturity to be able to hold it in a way that, they don't let themselves down by saying, yeah, no, it's cool, I don't actually want a long-term relationship with you. Give themselves over intimately in the hope that you may change. You hold your truth, and then they're like, oh, you fucking, you didn't change, and then they've let themselves down, So it does add another layer, but I think another layer of complexity. But I think if two people are completely comfortable with themselves, the intimacy is actually a way to really be able to deepen stuff, if you can hold it that way.
Yeah, no, 100% agree, but definitely. I think that's a good thing to sort of mention as well. So yeah, but that was just kind of like my experience at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it did allow me to have these kind of deeper relationships. Talking about, like, I guess, honesty, but you and I, over the years, we've had lots of chats, like around business and like things that we're doing and things that we're working on. And I mean, Yassi, if we both have to like go back, say, the last like 5 or so years on all the different kind of projects that we've worked on, I mean, probably most of them have fizzled out, and now we almost both find ourselves in the same kind of boat in terms of what we're working on. One of the main things that I understand that you find yourself working on now is your men's circles, which is effectively, I guess, men's coaching. But can you just maybe speak a little bit about the journey, like getting to deciding, okay, cool, this is what I actually want to do, because you'd made all those other, like you'd done those other businesses that hadn't maybe worked out or fizzled out, or you just got dead ends. Can you just just talk about what happened there?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at those less as like fizzled out and more as sort of evolutions, like different evolutions of things that I have experimented with and tried that gave me data that set me on a different path. Like I know a few things that perhaps didn't work, a few things that perhaps weren't aligned to what I was wanting to show up for. I think what I'm noticing at the moment is I'm spending a reasonable amount of time having a look at my money story. I touched about it on this at the beginning, but I'm working with a money coach and I'm doing some wealth clearing with a different training container. What I noticed that was driving a lot of those first businesses was money. Like there was a part of me that was anchored in a story that was like linked to the 4-hour work week, the idea of being a digital nomad. The part of me that's lazy, that's like, I can find an online business model that'll bring in thousands of dollars a month while I'm actually doing something else. And really what's at the base of all of those decisions and that driving is just some desire or need, or it's a place of scarcity almost, that I need to make money. And I think I've been focusing more on now is recognizing that the money is merely a byproduct, and that I really want to be in service and show up for whatever it is that I want to bring to the world in terms of what I think my gifts are. And for me, that evolution feels like it's for men that have probably been on this path, on a similar path, maybe a few steps behind me on the same path, as well as connecting with men that are probably further ahead of me on a different path and supporting one another by creating community and bringing men together in that space. So yeah, it's been a beautiful, wild ride, and at times it's been frustrating. At times it's been like, fuck, I'm just going to give up and go do something else. And those decisions are normally linked and based in a lack of financial return. Like it's not bringing the money in. So it's like, oh, fuck. But that to me points to a part of me that's only doing it for the money. And it's like, well, if you're going to be a coach or you want to be in service, you be in service first, and then find a business model or find a way to be paid for what it is that you're doing in a way that's indicative of the value that you're adding to the world, or the way that you're serving other people. And so I think I spent lots of time on the whiteboard strategizing funnels and all these fancy things around a coaching product. But what I really needed to do was go and coach and get out there and hold men's circles and be in service and show up and share your story and have authentic conversations and all the things that I believe are going to be in service, and recognize that I've already been looked after financially. You know, like I had a crypto blessing that came into my world that's given me financial abundance, that's meant that I haven't actually needed to earn money over the last 5 years as I've experimented with these business models that haven't quite yielded the results that I had hoped that they would. But I've also sat with this exact question and recognized that in some way, the magic of the universe has really used the allure of the online business model as a way to pull me into service, if that makes sense. You know, like the idea of being able to make passive income and thousands of dollars has kept me motivated in a way that I'm eventually like, okay, fuck, I actually need to go and do this thing. I need to actually get out there, start holding men's circles and be in service and do those things. And yeah, the business model is unfolding as I'm doing it. And I'm not 100% sure exactly whether it looks like coaching, group coaching, memberships, etc. I'm still in that inquiry, and we're spending time getting clear on what that is. Some of it has also recently been driven by my partner. Araminta is like, just go and do the things that you love to do anyway. And I've had some pretty good success in, holding men's spaces here where I go paddleboarding and sit in an ice bath with people, and I'm getting paid to do the things that I would be doing anyway. And so, it's been a beautiful journey. But I think really the beautiful part for me was recognizing that I think, had I not been so enamored with the potential of how much an online business could make, I probably would have given up. You know, I would have been like, oh, fuck. But, I saw people making money and I saw the opportunity there. And I think that was what sort of led me into the place of really coming to doing what it is that I need to do. And trusting that the money is flowing as it needs to. And the more I'm in service and the more impact I make and the more I show up, then that'll be reflected back to me in the success of the business.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, just a couple of things. Like, well, firstly, I'm really glad that a guy like you is offering coaching and men's circles, because I know that like you have so much to share, right? Through just your life journey, especially the last kind of 6 years of traveling and the growth that you've made as your, as a person. So that's amazing. But I'm really, really happy. And you're always you're one of my favorite sort of people to speak to, like I know like it's been less kind of over the last kind of year because we've obviously had Maya. So my life has been a bit more busy. But I've always like really enjoyed listening to how you view the world, and your philosophy on things. So I'm really glad like that you are now doing this and sharing your knowledge with more men, because we live in a strange time right now, bud, where there's a real lack of, feels like, masculinity, and our masculinity seems to be getting challenged a lot. We see this crazy cult, this trans cult, like that's going on, like it's just, it actually blows my mind that, for so many years, you had the feminist movements like going for women's rights, like fighting for women's rights, and eventually, like, women deservedly got what, they kind of like always should have had in terms of rights and responsibilities and kind of respect and how they were seen in society. And then now it's like this attack on, it feels like masculinity and on kind of femininity. And it's all for this tiny little trans community. So I think it's like our responsibility as guys that are, I don't want to say more masculine, but like we realize the issues. So, you know, we're trying to help guys sort of regain their masculinity and in turn leadership. So, you know, kind of what are your thoughts on this kind of whole thing that's going on, and how do we help build men to realize what it is that they really should be kind of like, or how they should be seeing themselves in society?
That's a good question. And it's an interesting time to be alive for sure, with all these different things that are going on. And I think the way that I look at it is perhaps a little bit more philosophical, and that's what I touched on already. And I believe that our outer world is merely a reflection of our inner worlds. And I think what we see projected out there is really a collective projection of what's happening inside each and every single one of us. And so where I bring that back to in terms of how I think we might be able to navigate this minefield is, recognize that there's a space in our world for, let's say, a family, for a mother and a father, and they create and bring different skill sets and different energetics to a family. You know, the mother tends to be more intuitive, a little bit more nurturing, perhaps a little bit more in touch emotionally, where a father tends to have a little bit more structure and a little bit more discipline, a little bit more strategy, that type of stuff. And those characteristics in themselves are sometimes called masculine and feminine. And I think what's happened in our world is people in male bodies tend to be overly identified with the masculine components of what it means to be a man. And perhaps we have a world where we have had less space and definitely less sort of role models or opportunities for us to see men that have actually integrated some of these feminine components. Because from what I understand is that these energies exist inside both of us. Both exist inside all of us, meaning women have got masculine tendencies as well. And by masculine tendencies, it means like the ability to be able to have a plan and go out there and do certain things. And you can also see that happening, like an over-identification in the masculine inside a woman. So for example, the boss bitch, you know, super hard driver, career focused, for example, is a woman that's wanting to make it in a masculine world and is using and embodying all of those characteristics as a way to be able to show up there. And I think the journey for each of us is to recognize that I have this analogy of an inner kingdom, and recognizing that inside all of us, we have not only masculine and feminine energies, but we've also got different voices. Like there's a young version of us, and there's a person inside each of us that does planning, you know, like looking ahead, like a CEO or a manager. There's a version of us inside ourselves that is also a kid, you know, there's a young version of ourselves. And I think to recognize that a healthy kingdom is really making sure that every single person inside that kingdom has what they need. They have the space to be able to share and be seen and be heard. But where I've noticed in my life in the past is I've come from a world in South Africa, which is, for men, we're over-identified with being masculine. You've got to be a bloke. You don't cry. You don't talk about your feelings. I felt uncomfortable to be vulnerable with my friends and family when things were out of control. And those are characteristics that I identify to be more sort of feminine characteristics. But what happens is that if you just ignore that for long enough, it eventually starts to create sort of dis-ease inside you, because there's some part of you that needs to be vulnerable, and there's some part of you that needs to be okay with being pretty or growing your hair or do something that represents some of these more feminine attributes, you know, sitting and, you know, just genuinely connecting with your emotions and sharing with other people in a way that is more a feminine sort of attributes. If you don't take the time to do that, those parts of yourself don't go away. They just get louder and louder and louder, and you tend to sort of just not give them space. And so, yeah, for me to recognize those parts of myself and give them space, and recognize that both of these energies exist inside me, and taking on and playing these different parts. The work of Carl Jung is really around archetypes and recognizing that these different archetypes exist as sort of frameworks or energy signatures in the collective. So if we read different archetypes, all of us know the archetype, for example, of a victim. When we say victim, it could be a male or a female, but they are the person that feels that bad has been done to them. We can use the archetype of a persecutor to recognize that that could be somebody that's using power over for others. And what I understand is that as we recognize all of these different behavioral patterns, they're called archetypes, the more of these that we can embody and hold safely, the easier it is for people to trust us. So what I mean by that is, like, if I can, put my hand to two ponytails, put makeup on and dance around as a woman and be in my feminine and be completely okay with it and make everybody around me feel safe, that's a very different energetic feeling to recognizing Gareth, who's this like hardcore blokey bloke who doesn't access any of that part of himself, because it comes back to that thing that I was talking about earlier, which is like, some part of me is not showing up authentically. There's something that wants to move and I'm not giving it space. And so, yeah, when I connect with you, some parts of me are like making a noise that want some airtime, but I don't give them any space because I'm this guy and I'm going to continue to be this guy. And I think in some ways that sort of comes out sideways. And I think that for me was at the basis of my sex addiction, like where I couldn't recognize and hold my own inner princess, just recognize her. I would use my ability to be a seductress to get laid. So like what I'm actually doing there is I'm not using my princess and honoring her for who she is. I'm almost using her as a way to get my own needs met, but it's coming from a very masculine place. And so it came out sideways as sex addiction. So anyway, that's a long way of saying how I look at what I see happening in the world at the moment. And I think I think there's nothing for any of us to fix out there. All of us just need to focus on what's happening inside, and the outside fixes itself. And so where we see a collective shadow of toxic masculinity, I'm not by any means recognizing that we don't come from a place where our over-identification of masculinity and capitalism and corporate bullshit has created a lot of mess on the planet. I think that's very much true. And I think that there's something that can be solved there. But I think for the rest, I think the work is nothing out there to be fixed. It's really to look inside ourselves. And are we making space for all these various parts of ourselves and recognizing who they are and what it is that they need? Because once we do those things, we start to integrate in ourselves, and it ripples out into our relationships and our families and our communities. And that's really where I see the potential way through for what's unfolding in the world around us. So yeah, it's kind of a long way of getting there, but that's sort of how I hold that conversation at the moment. It's prickly because I'm also a white male in a male body. I have all the privilege of what comes from being a male, but I also do see a space in the world where in some ways we're being blamed for stuff that isn't our fault in some ways, like we've been handed the paradigm of what we were born into, the skin we were born into, the body we were born into. But I also don't want that shame and projection, and I don't want that to hold me back from being in service. Like, I can't change who I am. I can't change whatever it is that I was born into, the country and the world that I was born into. All I can do is work on me. And so, yeah, recognizing where I'm not being authentically me and showing up for those parts, I think are in some way being in service to the collective.
I really like what you say there, is whereby like our inner self is kind of a reflection on what's going on in society. And, the fact that all this stuff is going on is a sign, I feel like, that people are really either super confused. They are being fed a lot of false information about who they are and what it means to kind of be human. And that's just that confusion is just kind of like almost creating this kind of like, there seems to be like a big mental health issue that is then kind of like just getting blown out of proportion with how people are reacting, when it comes to like I said, this sort of cult that seems to be going on, So it's very interesting, and I like what you say there. It's just yeah, unfortunately, I don't know if everyone is prepared to realize that they have work to do. Because if people did realize that we each have so much work to do, then the world would be an amazing place. But yeah, it's a journey that we kind of I guess need to go through, and it's just part of the sort of era that we're living in, and it's up to, I guess, people like you and maybe people like me to share our experiences and philosophies and stuff, and if more people understand like and see the world kind of with how you just described it, I think yeah, I think we would find ourselves in a different place completely. I think talking about like relationships and stuff, you and I have spoken quite a lot recently about relationships with our parents, and you shared something really interesting with me recently by a guy called Daniel. Is it Schmachtenberger?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's obviously like a seriously fantastic communicator, and he has this sort of timeline and questions to kind of ask our parents, just to kind of understand them better, which allows us to understand ourselves better. And one thing you actually said to me, which was really interesting, about like your relationship with your mom. You said that you like had a really like high level kind of relationship with your mom, which to me I was like, yeah, see, no ways. I thought, I like from the outside, I'm like, no ways, Gareth. Like I always check him, like, he travels with his mom, and he just from knowing you my whole life, I was like, I wouldn't have said that. But you've obviously gone through these questions and stuff with your mom and your dad. Can you just speak a little bit about your kind of relationship with your folks, and the journey and dance that you've had with them over the last years, and maybe the years where things have kind of really sort of changed and flourished for you guys?
Yeah, Daniel Schmackenberg is amazing. I think if we could put somebody in charge of the world, I would choose him. Maybe him and Zach Bush, if I was to choose two people to be in charge. He's amazingly articulate. He's a very good thinker. Anyway, when I saw this conversations to have with your parents before they die post that he did, we spent some time looking through it, and I recognized that there was probably quite a lot of gold for me to go through that process with, specifically with my mom. And I think where the relationship with my mom has been is she's pretty conservative in her outlook and her upbringing, and I see that she's also like a very strong homebody. She's Cancerian, and I think me growing up as the teenager, the rebel that I told you about earlier, I think it was a difficult kid to manage, that young rebel that wanted to just be out there. I didn't like school. The worst punishment you could give me was to ground me, like to take away my freedom. Like those were some of the things that would really get to me the most. And so I think my mom and I were in this dance when I was a teenager, where she wanted to create safety for me by putting boundaries in place, like curfews and things that I could and couldn't do, which really just triggered my rebel that wanted to just do whatever the fuck he wanted to, even when he was 13. And we were in that dance, and I think I was quite a difficult kid to be a parent to. And there were times when I thought my mom was just trying to fuck up my jam and didn't want to give me space, and it was unreasonable and all these things. So the normal teenage stuff. And then pretty much soon after finishing high school, I then went traveling. And so we've never really spent a lot of time together, living together in each other's space, as I've gone on my journey and done my own work and my own self-exploration and stuff. But I think where that left us was just at some place having a little bit of like a surface level relationship, where things are amazing between us now, but we've never really got past the barrier of being mom and son. And so what that looks like is like, I've never really got to know her and ask her any of the things that I would ask any of my really good friends, for example. And so what I recognized was playing out in my relationship with her was like, I would put in a call once a week or once every 2 weeks, and we would be like, hey, how's it going? How are the family, friends? How's my uncle? How's these people? Blah, 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 And after one phone call, I put it down and I was like, if she wasn't my mom, I probably wouldn't give that relationship too much time because it's too surface level. I like having real conversations about like what's upsetting you, are you good, you know, like, and we were just stuck in this like familiarity, I would say. Anyway, so we went through this process of conversations to have with your parents before you die. The way that I framed that was really as my own desire, as like, hey, I want to get to know you better, and life is short, and I would hate anything to happen to any one of us and not have had the chance to ask any of the questions that we may want to ask. And so I would like to create a space where we can jump on a Zoom call, and we use this framework that he outlined, and yeah, just give your life story with me having the opportunity to ask any of the questions that I want about who you are. And I think instead of having the conversation as mother and son, we really got the opportunity to almost be like in our sisters, you know, just to sit and gossip and how was it? And did you have love? And when did you lose your virginity? And like just genuinely create a safe space to have that conversation in a way that we never could have had without that, creating that space. And so, yeah, we did 2 Zoom calls. The first was my mom sharing her timeline of her life and me asking questions. And then the next Zoom call was me sharing my timeline, and she got to ask all the questions of things that she may have seen from the outside as a mother, but never really got the opportunity to get in and ask all those questions. And so, yeah, it was super beautiful, and it's taken our relationship to a new place. Like, yeah, I can tell her straight what's happening in my relationship with Araminta, where I'm feeling anxious about work or the world or whatever. And yeah, it's just really created a sense of depth. And I think it almost circles back to where we started. We were basically in the same place of not being authentic with each other, you know? We're like, hey, how are you? Yeah, fine, you know, have that conversation. But really, like, what's actually alive is like, I'm feeling anxious about this, or I'm, you know, worried about this, or the world's fucked, or whatever it is. But I just get the chance to genuinely share it and have her do the same for me. I think has taken our relationship to another level. And so it's been a really beautiful process to go through with her.
Yeah, that's super cool. But it's amazing. Like like Craig and I, we used to talk about this a lot because we did the podcast. You know, we were obviously speaking to people about their life stories. And then what we started doing is we also started getting some mates on the podcast, you know, like you. And then, you know, he had a couple of mates and I had a couple of mates come on. And what we both realized through just doing the podcast was like, we don't really even know our friends that well. Like you go through life with these people and you experience life, you know, and you do fun things as you do as mates, and you play sport and you go to school and you chase chicks and you get in fights and you know you get drunk and you play silly buggers, but actually you don't really sit down and go, yes, tell me about your parents, you know, tell me about your relationship with your parents, tell me about, yes, what was your life like as a 3-year-old, or what were you doing, and all these sort of things. And I actually feel like it's such an important thing to do with not just your parents, but to do with your buddies as well. Like, you know, like we've had like Ryan on the podcast, and things like he spoke about like living in Mauritius and with his like grandmother helping with growing him up and things like that. You know, I can't remember all the stories. And but like just like when we were speaking, I was like, yes, but how did I go through school with you and I never ever knew these things? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think it's a really important thing for people to sort of consider, like, how deep are your relationships really? Like, do you actually have these sort of discussions with your friends? Or is it just kind of like high level stuff? I think it's a really important thing for us all to kind of consider.
I mean, bro, it's at the basis of what is lighting me up about holding a weekly men's circle, you know, like the idea of coming together once a week. I hold 2 circles, one's online and one's in person. And yeah, we don't sit in that circle and tell stories. Like the check-in there is like what's genuinely alive. The invitation is to be with what's really alive for you in every single moment. So that is the thing that's worrying you, or that's, you know, holding you back at the moment, or the turmoil that you feel in your relationship or your business or whatever. And so, yeah, I think the connections that are formed inside those circles is a really, really beautiful space to get to know somebody, not through the stories and the masks, but for what's genuinely alive. Like the space is created as a way to be able to say, cool, I'm having an amazing week. But if you're not having an amazing week, don't say you're having an amazing week. When you're having say what's genuinely alive in you in your experience at that time. And the rest of the circle receives that without any judgment. It's not like, anything else. It's just, there's not even that at that check-in stage, a space for anybody to give anything. It's just really for you to share. And so, yeah, I think it's helping support what it is that you're speaking about there, which is, just how do we get to know people? Because without that, especially in, social environments, there's like some etiquette of being polite and asking the questions about where you're from and what do you do for a living. And it's necessary to get to know somebody. But yeah, the real trust and authenticity is developed when you get to know what's genuinely alive for them.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess another thing that I really like and am inspired by you, besides your honesty and your authenticity and that sort of stuff, is your motivation as a person. But you like to do like hard things, and you've done quite a few hard things in your life, like Ironman, cycling halfway through Africa sort of thing. More recently you did the Goggins challenge, which I was supposed to do with you, but I didn't end up doing it. And you like just went through and did it with not much training. Like, where does your like internal motivation come from? And I guess maybe it's linked to discipline, maybe it's linked to love or having fun. But yeah, what drives you?
Thanks, man. And first of all, you were having a baby, but you're very well excused for not showing up for that.
Thanks, buddy.
I didn't have that level of commitment in my life at the time. So, I think I've recognized at some point, I can't remember where it started as a kid. I think just a part of me likes to be in my body. So, the physical challenges of being in my body have always felt good for me. Like, it's a strength in some areas, because I love to move my body and I love to exercise. But the shadow side of that is that my vices tend to be vices of the body, like sexual pleasure or food or stuff like that. That tends to be like, I don't geek out so much with intellectual stuff. If I'm going to fall off the wagon, it's going to be with something that's a body pleasure, So I think that's probably at the basis of what drives me wanting to do physical challenges that involve my body. But I think more recently, I've recognized that I actually want life to be easy for me, and that generally life doesn't always work out the way we plan. Like there's, despite all our best efforts, we will get sick. People that we love, we're going to pass away. We will lose jobs. We will lose money. Whatever those things happen, those are going to happen anyway. And I think what comes for me is really the recognition that if you have been training yourself by doing difficult things, when difficult things come, you've trained for them. And so life just tends to be a little bit more stable and a little bit more easy in a way that I think I don't like the idea of being like, oh, I'm fucking drowning. Oh my God, it's an amazing day. Oh, I'm fucked again. Like that up and down wave for me doesn't feel so good on my nervous system. There's something about just getting up every morning and getting into the ice bath that's like, okay, I don't want to do this. And I think just very specifically, I think that particular practice has been really a critical piece of me stopping engaging with cannabis. Is that, yes, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be moments when you feel anxious, but you also feel anxious before you get into the ice bath. But the process of training that or lifting weight or doing a challenge or doing a thing is really cultivating that resilience that, when life sends you a curveball, which it does, like to pretend that you're not going to be sent a curveball is really just to put your head in the sand. It's going to happen. But you have the ability to be able to cultivate that resilience so that when those things come, you just manage them a little bit more solidly, and you're a little bit more well prepared for it. So I think that's really at the basis of it. And then the second part for me, which is also linked, is like, I'm in this meat suit for as long as I've got awareness of this particular body. Like, you can have as much money as you want. You can have the best looking wife. You can have a Porsche. You can have whatever you want. But if you don't have your health, I think the saying is that a wealthy man has many desires, but a sick man has only one. And it's like, taking the time to realize that if you don't have your health, that's the only thing you're going to want. And so, taking time to do that stuff, and for me, health really is not only physical, it's the emotional health as well. Your mental health, the sitting meditation every single morning, like those are the things that support all the other pieces of my life. And I see them as foundational upon which everything else stands. So
for me to continually build a strong foundation is really at the basis of doing hard things. So whether that's, going for a run, lifting weights, riding a bike, whatever that is, yoga, is supportive of everything else in my life.
I really like that, but health is wealth, that's for sure. And get like comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what you said, the idea around like doing hard things prepares you for when a hard thing does actually happen. And I think that's, lots of people that maybe they don't see it that way, and then when a hard thing does happen and it comes, then they're like, yes, flipping flustered and don't know how to handle it and whatnot. But if you are pushing yourself, mentally, physically, and something does come up, you're like, cool, I got this. I know how to handle this. So I really like that, the kind of way of thinking about it. Just to kind of wrap this up a little bit, Bud, I like to ask people 2 books. It could be 2 books, or say like 2 people who have sort of altered your way of thinking, and in a positive way, kind of like how you might see life or treat life, or act yourself, that you think are kind of worthy of sharing with the audience.
That's a beautiful question, and it's one of those things that I could spend a lot of time unpacking the things that I've learned. I think what I can say before I answer the question is like, your experience, my experience, is really a function of the people that I spend time with and the books and teachers that I study with. Because I think from how I understand reality creation or hacking our reality is we only have the ability to be able to make decisions based on the data that we've got in our filing system in our head. So if you've got a filing system that says life is a struggle or making money is a struggle, you will continually find ways, the reticulated brain, I can't remember the terminology, but your mind continually looks for things in its specific sphere and filters out everything else that confirms your beliefs. And so taking time to read and study and do those sorts of things really expands your ability to be able to see new possibilities and new opportunities. So it's also an important part of my personal path of making sure that I'm reading stuff that expands what I'm thinking, reading stuff that is outside of what I currently believe. The opposite of what I believe is also something that has served me. But the book that comes up first of all for me was The Secret. It's based on one of the subtle laws called the law of attraction. When I first read it, I had never heard of the law of attraction. The fact that it was one of the 12 spiritual laws, the word spiritual didn't resonate with me from the world that I came in from. And that was also true because of, the world that I was in. Like the idea of spiritual, I didn't have a spiritual path. And I think it was anchored in a part of me that had been raised in a Christian household, and I didn't find a space where I felt comfortable in traditional religion. And so I pushed all of that away, including spirituality. And it created a very small world for me to be able to, or rather a small lens for me to be able to see the world through, that kept me stuck. But when I opened up and it's like, what if this could be true? I recognized that, there's something actually happening here. And so The Secret, recognizing how our thoughts become things and how we bring conscious awareness to what it is that we're thinking about, those thoughts then shape the stories that eventually shape our reality, has changed my life in many ways and has shaped my work that I actually teach inside of my community, of how to be aware of what it is that we're thinking about. It also got me onto the meditation path, which was, again, cultivating the awareness to recognize my thoughts. So The Secret comes up for me. I would say The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle. I haven't read it recently in the last few years, but I remember at the time reading the book and just having many light bulb moments of being like, wow, this is just exactly what I needed at the time that I needed it. And I think, books are very much like that. Different people can read the same book and be at different stages of their lives, and it resonates for one person, but not for the other. And likewise, I think I could probably pick up that book now and get different stuff from it. But I do recognize that there was a part of that book which was talking about the pain body, which was this experience of recognizing that we're carrying some wound, and whenever that pain body gets touched, it shapes our decisions and our stories in a specific way that, again, if you can bring awareness to that, you can shift those. And so, yeah, it's been a while since I read it, but that's what comes up for me now when I think about the second book. But I actually have a full library of books that I've read and the notes that I've made and stuff like that I share with my community, because it's such an important piece of the personal development path, because a book gives you insight into another great thinker or leader or whatever, his world or their world, or in a way that you just don't often have access. And it really is an amazing opportunity. And I think podcasts are the same. You get to spend an hour and a half listening to, I don't know, Andrew Huberman, who's this fucking amazing scientist. He's been so fundamental. He was pretty instrumental. His episode on cannabis was one of the things that, got me just thinking a little bit more critically about what cannabis was actually doing to my body from a scientific perspective. So, podcasts and books are a huge piece for me. So, those are the two: The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle and The Secret.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, bud. I know it's like a hard question because you probably read like 500 books and you're like, there's probably like 10 others that you would also recommend. And like after the conversation, you're like, oh, fuck, I should have said this.
I wish I'd said that.
Yeah, exactly. so no, I know it's like a curveball kind of question. But just kind of second last question, but what are you kind of most excited about at the moment? What are you working on, and how can people get in touch with you?
So the Fathers, Sons, Brothers community is my men's community. It has a weekly men's circle called the King's Circle that's open to anybody that wants to check in. It happens on Zoom on Thursdays. It has a membership community attached to it for those that want to connect a little bit more with men. It's based on what we're talking about right now, that you are a function of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And if you don't have access to conscious beings that are committed to their own personal development, this is an opportunity for you to be able to connect with men that are committed to their personal growth, even if they don't know exactly what that is, but they have a desire to want to do that. So the Father, Sons, Brothers community at fatherssonsbrothers.com. That page also has links to my podcast called the Call to Courage podcast. And the word courage originally means to speak from the heart. And the aim of the podcast is to have authentic conversations that when you speak from the heart, you actually cultivate more courage. And that's basically been the theme of this conversation. There's a time in my life when I didn't speak from the heart, when I, told white lies or pretended that everything was fine when it wasn't. And so, inside that wound is me really wanting to share the conversations that I think move the needle and support specifically men, but the conversations are for anybody. We interview women and men on the podcast. And just having those conversations that I think I didn't have access to on my path. So we talk about some of the stuff that we spoke about when you were on my show around, circumcision, birth trauma, the collective money wound, like the sexual shadow that we all have. Like, I want to have all of those conversations and shine the light on them. And they don't all necessarily have to be true, or they don't all have to resonate with you, but I do want to have those conversations as a way to give space to them. But it's also much like you're doing now, like it's a really, said differently, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your questions. And when you host a podcast, it gives you the opportunity to practice your question asking. And the better questions you ask, the more you access different stories and knowledge in a way that you don't if you don't practice asking questions. So that's the Call to Courage podcast. And those two things are really lighting me up at the moment. I'm also keen, and I've got some juice to teach transformational relationships, some of the frameworks that I'm using in my own life to cultivate a solid me. I'm also using to support my partnership with Araminta. And I think I'm going to run some training around that in the future. So, but the podcast and the men's circles is where I'm putting a lot of my energy at the moment.
Awesome, bud. And how can people find out about that website, social media?
Gareth Pickering on Twitter, Facebook, garethpickering.com. And then there'll be links there as well to fatherssonsbrothers.com, and the podcast is there as well.
Okay, awesome, my man. Yeah, and obviously I'll share all that sort of stuff in the show notes and stuff too. And then the last question, which we actually didn't ask you because it was a question we only started asking like later on in the podcast, was what does being ridiculously human mean to you?
To me, it means
being you. I think this authenticity theme that we've danced with in this conversation, like ridiculously human, is just to be you. Like we're all uniquely gifted and blessed with our own unique spark, and to try and be anything else except who we authentically are is to try and be something else. So I think to be ridiculously human to me is just to be me, and that's all the world needs from me, is just to show up as my authentic self, and that includes warts and all.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. Like it's warts and all also means that you have like a uniqueness to offer, and I guess the more people realize that we are kind of unique and we all have something different to offer, I guess the more people maybe will come out of their shells and be kind of ridiculously human in that way. So yeah, but Jesse, listen, I just want to say thanks for coming on the show. It's actually been flipping deep, hasn't it? Like we just went kind of straight in there, which is also lacquer, like we flipping laughed and partied and stuff our whole lives, and so actually having like these deep conversations is kind of due, and it's nice, I think, for people to kind of be a fly on the wall and listen to two kind of like middle-aged blokes talk about these things, because we're interested in them, and we're also dancing with life and trying to figure things out. And your philosophy on things I really, really, really enjoy listening to. And I think you got a great outlook on life. I think you're looking flipping awesome, bud. You speak and communicate super well, and I've just like noticed such a huge change in that. And probably maybe the podcast has helped a lot, but also you just being conscious of how you are. I'm sure you work on that a lot too. And thanks so much for sharing, like with such honesty, bud. And I think that's such a unique quality. So keep being a legend, bud, and we'll look forward to seeing you in person and having flipping whatever it is, a coffee or kombucha or some ayahuasca or whatever it is.
Yeah, bro, thanks again for stepping up for everything that you're doing. I think creating these spaces and activating the podcast again is necessary, bro. The people that you speak to are the versions of the show that I've listened to have been really so beneficial for me. And I think the more conversations like this that we have, the more we get this type of work out into the world. And so I just want to say thanks for that, and for reconnecting with your creativity. I know it's not always easy being a new dad, and your priorities have shifted a bit, but bro, honoring both your journey as a dad and as a husband, and activating this space again is an honor. So I appreciate you, bro. Thank you.
Cheers, my boy.